Yes.
Thank you. I'm proud to call to order the meeting of the special meeting of August 22nd, 2024. Can we get a roll call?
Councilmember Brown,
Here.
Councilmember Domkowski,
Here.
Councilmember Gold,
Here.
Councilmember Shaw,
Here.
and Vice Mayor
Here.
and Wall is absent.
Before we go, Gene, is there procedurally, is there a point at which we're supposed to acknowledge where Chris is at and have the council take an action? And
Yes.
if so, is now that time.
Yes, now is the time. It's my understanding that Councilmember Shaw has a contagious illness, which prevents him from participating in person. And so he would request the emergency exception for attendance, and that requires the council to vote to okay that.
So do you want me to request a special dispensation because I have COVID? When you say I have a communicable disease, that starts the mind wandering.
Sorry, didn't want to disclose your health issue.
So Gene, we need a motion to,
Correct.
do we have a motion to allow Councilmember Shaw to attend the meeting remotely
Because of his communicable disease.
per his disease?
Yes. So moved.
Second?
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Domkowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Gold,
Yes.
Councilmember Shaw,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor Fluid.
Yes, and Gene, I think I should probably say that I am also attending remotely. I had the agenda posted for the required time, and there is no one else in the room with me for the meeting.
Thank you.
Although, let me just say this, which is my 8th grade humanities class is watching this morning as part of our civic education project.
Too late.
So please watch your language.
Good to know. Too late.
All right, could I get Councilmember Domkowski to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Absolutely. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we are moving on to the public comment portion pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.3A. Persons wishing to address the council on non-agendized items that are within the jurisdiction of the town are invited to do so. Please note, however, that the council is not able to undertake extended discussion or to act on non-agendized items. Such items can be referred to staff for appropriate action, which may include placement on a future agenda. This communication period is limited to 5 persons, 3 minutes each. Anyone who is wishing to be heard on something not on today's agenda is welcome to do so now. Okay, not seeing any hands in the Zoom room, assuming there is no one in the building for non-agendized items. Okay, moving on to new business. We have one item today. 3 resolutions of the town council of the town of Woodside acknowledging that only one candidate was nominated from each of the 3 districts from which elections are scheduled to be held on November 5th, 2024, and appointing those candidates in lieu of holding the scheduled elections. And I assume I am turning this to Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor and Council. So thanks for making time this morning, everyone. As we said in the staff report and in the notice, we're bound by election law to inform both post publicly and also inform the governing body, the council, when we have an election after the nomination period where there is one or no candidates for open seats. And so the situation that we are confronted with is we have one candidate nominated, successfully filed papers for each of the 4 districts that are up for election in November. And I'm pursuant to the government code, the council may, it does not direct this meeting, but it does provide the opportunity to do it. And we had a couple of people interested in holding it. And the council can take, at this point, 1 of 2 actions, given that you have nominees for each of these seats. The first option is to take no action today on resolutions in your packet and proceed with the election in November. One of the things that would provide for is the write-in period a period for write-in candidacies, which, as we note in the staff report, and as one of our sitting members is aware, well, as you were all aware, we have had in the history of the town at least 2 times when a write-in candidate was elected. So that's more than an academic point in Woodside. The alternative to that would be that the council there are in your packet 3 resolutions, 1 for each of the district elections. So the council could, and you would need 4 votes to do this, but you could forego the election and appoint the nominee to that seat. And they would take office in December as they would had they been elected in November. I think I've some other just information in the background that we provided. One, of course, was the fact of the write-ins, and canceling the election obviously foregoes that option. The other, the cost of the last election, and we anticipate the cost of this election would be around $15,000. It's not known to us exactly because it's an allocation of all the elections that the county runs all around the county. So, but I would expect it to fall in that same range as well if the election were to go forward. I think I've covered everything. If there are any questions, let me know.
Any questions for staff? Jean has something to add.
Yes, I just wanted to,
Yeah, 2 quick ones.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add one thing if I could. And I wanted to explain why we have 3 resolutions before you instead of 1 resolution covering all 3 seats. The reason for that is we have incumbents who are running, and there's always a question of whether or not an incumbent can vote on an issue that would affect their own election. The FPPC has indicated the answer to that is yes, that Elections Code 10229 specifically allows for all council members to participate. Having said that, Councilmember Gold, who is present, can make a decision if he chooses to do so to recuse. And we see throughout the state, sometimes people participate, sometimes they don't. There's no requirement to recuse, but that is why we've provided 3 separate resolutions, just in case he chooses to recuse on the resolution regarding his seat. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Yes. What is the last date a write-in candidate can participate in the election? Is the day of the election? Is that
No, there's
their
actually,
shut off time?
there's a window and it begins, yeah, we do have it here. So a write-in candidate, it has to follow, there are prescribed rules in the election code as well. So a write-in candidate to qualify needs to follow a process, but that write-in window begins September 9th and it closes October 22nd. So I mean, I think somebody could write a name on a ballot, but in terms of a candidate qualifying and being duly elected, they would follow the election code.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Maybe I could ask Gene this question. I just wanted to confirm something, or Chris might very well know, given his experience. I was always under the impression that a write-in candidate has to be qualified.
Yeah.
That is that you can write in any name you want, as Kevin said, but they won't, even if they get a majority of the votes, if they're not qualified, they won't be elected. You have to actually be qualified and I think agree to be accepted or to accept the position if you win. Gene, is that correct?
It's my understanding that a write-in candidate would need to comply with the forms that the town clerk is required to provide to them if they want to be a write-in candidate. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Shaw.
Yeah, so that's correct. I mean, you have to go pull the papers. You still have to get the signatures from 20 residents in your district. I was fortunate when I did it. We weren't by district at that point. And you're expected to follow all the same rules that people who have qualified for the ballot are on there. I think the only real difference is that your name is not on the ballot, but all of the marketing legal stuff you still have to follow. And then, can I ask a question? That's why I actually had thrown my hand up.
Please.
So just thinking about what you need to get done today, how many votes do you need to do this? Is it a majority or we need 4?
You need 4.
That was it.
Okay. Councilmember Domkowski, any questions?
I do, thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Has anyone thus far come to town hall or inquired of staff about what would be involved in a write-in candidacy? Has any interest been shown?
No, I have not received any.
Okay. And I guess the only other question I have is, one of the reasons that was given in the staff report for holding an election is that some people may prefer to be elected rather than appointed. Has any candidate come to staff or town and asked us to spend money so that they may be elected rather than appointed?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess I got one more question then. If Ned, it's
Okay,
okay?
go ahead, please. Yeah.
Okay. Is each candidate going to still submit their 300 word description of their candidates, of their qualifications?
So those were already due and two of the candidates did submit statements.
One did not?
One did
Is
not.
that a requirement?
It's not a requirement. It's optional.
But, and is the question, would those still be published in the?
Yes, will
election
they still be
material?
published? In other words,
Hmm.
we have at least one candidate that most people are not familiar with because they haven't been serving on the council. And I'm wondering if there's going to be a statement, written statement that the community can see when they go to the voting box.
If it's optional, but if the town council chooses to move forward with the election, all of the paperwork that was submitted it will be the same. So yes, the candidate statements would be in the
But if we don't go forward,
if you don't go forward, no, they're not. They're not. If you appoint, they're not.
Melissa, quick question. Could we, if we do appoint, could we still publish? Well, I guess my first question, who has submitted candidate statements? You're allowed to tell us.
Jennifer Wall and Hassan Abrish.
Okay. And then if we do appoint, could we put those two statements up on the town website?
I believe we can.
Thank you. Any other? Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, another question for Jean. So it requires 4 votes to approve each of these 3 resolutions. So if they fail to get 4 votes, that means we're having the election.
That's correct.
Any other
Interesting.
questions from staff? Or sorry, for staff. Okay, seeing none, we'll open it up to public comment. Anyone in the room wish to address the council? Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Hassan Abarish, and I'm running for town council for District 5, and I wanted to come and share my thoughts on this. So my initial thought was that as somebody who's fiscally conservative, generally, why waste the money if only 3 people are running for 3 spots? It doesn't really make sense to spend $15,000. But thinking about it further, talking to other people, neighbors, people in my district, there's another issue that I think specifically is related to me, doesn't so much affect Paul or Jen, the mayor, but nobody knows me, I think, except for my neighbors and people. I've lived here almost 4 years. And I believe I would make a good town council member, but not everyone knows me. And so to the extent people get to know me and they decide that they don't believe I would be, I think it's important that they have the option to be able to find another candidate and to have a write-in. And I think just it sets a precedent. And there's a risk that, somebody runs and is unopposed and happens to be the only person who submitted documentation on time, and then people go and find out more about them, and maybe they have a Confederate flag waving in their front yard, and they're have extreme political views, and when people get to know them, they say this is not the right person, but it's too late. They've already been selected, and they're going to be on the town council for the next 4 years. So personally, that's just my thoughts, but I would respect whichever way everyone votes. Thank you.
Thank you. No one in the Zoom room with their hands up. Is there anyone else in the council chambers?
There's nobody else in council chambers.
Okay, then we will turn it to council deliberations. And maybe we'll start with Councilmember Gold because he's to my left today.
Okay, thank you. I'd like first, I wanted to thank Hassan for agreeing to run for election. It's you really don't know what you're getting into till you're on this side of the table and people are yelling at you from the other side, but I appreciate volunteering to do this. So thank you for that. I just wanted to make 2 points and I'll try to make them quickly as a departure from my usual. One, I wanted to echo what Hassan said, and that is, I think there is an immense difference between an appointment and an elected official. I think there's a certain connotation. There's a power. You're there with the consent of the voters and not just the appointment of, 4 or 5 elected officials. And I think that that's a big, big difference. And I think that it's important because it really relates a seriousness of validity and a defensibility to sitting on this side of the table. You're here with the consent of the people and not just you were appointed. And I know I've said this before about other issues. I consider it a point of pride that I was elected, obviously by larger margins than my colleagues. I always like to point that out. But in all seriousness, I think that we don't have elections very often and we serve for 4 years. And it's nice to at least at one moment in time, expose yourself to the voters and allow them to weigh in and do it. The second reason I wanted to mention is the cost issue. And yes, it's between $10,000 and $15,000. I think it's varied over the years. That represents 1/20th of 1% of our town's budget. We likely spend more money on goodwill for employees and council members than that. And so I think that, we always talk lately there's a lot of talk about democracy and elections. And I think this is just one of those issues where I think that folks deserve the ability to weigh in. And even though we're running unopposed, let them cast their votes or not cast their votes. And I think that given the contention that we've experienced, especially over the last year or so with the housing element, we shouldn't be appointing people if there's an election that's there. And so I will always err on that side. And I hope that I'll be voting against these resolutions so that we can have the election for all 3 people. And by the way, I won't be recusing. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Let's go to Councilmember Shaw.
Yep, sorry, caught me with not my mouth full, but
Take your
Kleenex up there. Yeah, so there's 2 sides to this thing, and I think Paul touched on both of them. Having been the guy that ran a write-in campaign, it was very different. It was a pretty contentious time in Woodside town politics. That being said, there is something to be said for going through the process and grinding it out and going through the scrutiny of the public, not knowing if anybody's going to throw their hat in the ring between now and October. I don't remember the exact date. Sorry. But it could happen, right? And that's, it's a pretty tall mountain to climb. So I tend to lean on the side of, democracy, if you want to play it that way. I think when we do appoint people, I think it cheapens the seat. I was going to make a Civil War reference and talk about 3/5 and things like that, but Ned, you asked me not to do things like that. So it was only going to be for Councilmember Gold.
I'll tell you what, right after this meeting, I'm talking to those students, so fire away. Whatever you need to say.
But I also think the fiduciary side of it's important. I mean, I know it's in the grand scheme of our budget, it's not a huge number, but it is a number, right? And, there will be people that sat there and said you ran a stupid election when you didn't have to, and you blew 15,000 of our taxpayer dollars. But I would also question spending $11,000 on a consultant to help perfectly able people do long range planning. I also tried to raise the issue about spending $300,000 on side or crosswalks. Now that's health and safety versus other things. So I just want to fully recognize we're spending 15 grand if we vote to do this. And that number doesn't change whether we appoint one and elect two or however we do it, right? Once we decide to hold an election for one, it's pretty much the same cost for all three. So I'm interested in hearing what everybody else has to say.
Thank you, Councilmember Shaw. We'll move on to Councilmember Brown.
Frankly, I was very impressed with Hassan said and his willingness to subject himself to an election instead of just taking an appointment. It says a lot to me about not only Hassan, but I think the process itself is important. I think the public should know who are they voting for. They do know Jen, they do know Paul, they don't know Hassan. And if we don't go through some kind of an election, they won't find out enough about him until he's sitting up here with us. So I would be, and with Paul, that I think we should go forward with the election.
Thank you. Councilmember Domkowski.
Well, I think for reasons of civic discourse in Mr. Fluitt's 8th grade civics class, I'm going to voice the dissenting opinion. So you guys have something to talk about.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, this is not an absolute situation. Like a lot of things, it is about sort of a reasonable process, a relative decision. And I will admit that I'm probably more focused on the budget than the average person. I serve on the audit committee with Councilmember Gold. I'm in the finance world. And I'm not flippant about tax dollars, whether it's $100 or $1 million, it's still taxpayer money. We are charged as prudent fiduciaries with the implementation of those dollars. We do have a limited budget, as we know. So there are a lot of lenses to look at this issue on. We've heard about, we're going to defend democracy as one of those lenses. But when you have a situation where town of Woodside's been around for almost 70 years, we run on average 3.5 elections a year when we had a 7-person council every 2 years. That's 122 elections. We've had 2 write-in candidacies. So there's a 98 to 99% outcome, if you will. If you want to run an election, probably the worst way to run an election is as a write-in candidate with your name not on the ballot. It doesn't say a lot about your thought process. Now, sometimes there's a very polarizing situation and a wonderful candidate that can spearhead a new movement in town, and that's what happened with Councilmember Shaw. But I guess I look at this and it's a bit of a foregone conclusion is my issue. So it's not, I get it, it's not absolute, but from a relative point of view, if I came to you and I said, hey, here's 15,000, give me $15,000. This is a new investment opportunity. Well, what's the outcome? Well, 99% of the time it's zero. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't want to do that. Well, then what happens? I'm a gambler. What about that 1%? Well, 1% of the time there's a secondary process where it's a coin flip where it still might be zero. I don't think that passes the reasonable man test about, or the prudent man test, as they say, prudent person test in this environment. So I guess when I look at it, it doesn't, if I said, give me your $15,000 for this investment, you might make a very different decision than if you're spending the treasury of Woodside for the sake of democracy in an environment where we have 3 uncontested elections, where it takes us 18 to 24 months to appoint people to the ASRB just to have a full committee where, I think we are hearing a little bit about where we should maybe be investing or not investing from the people themselves, because there is a lack of interest. It is a sad state of democracy in Woodside at the current time that we have 3 uncontested elections. There is nothing better for democracy than contested elections. There's nothing better than being out and being engaged with the people and hearing what they have to say and remembering who we work for. So I don't think this is a good use of money. And so I will vote. It's very clear that I'm going to be the dissenting opinion, and I will look to get an update from Mr. Fluitt on what his 8th grade class had to say about that.
Great. Thank you. And yeah, 3 days ago, I've been kind of torn about this. When I first looked at it, it seemed like kind of a no-brainer. We could save 15, maybe more $1,000. And I also looked at it in terms of timing and, opportunity. And I thought, well, some months ago, we voted to have an election. If you didn't know this was an election year, you've been living under a rock. So I think anyone had plenty of notice that there was going to be some election this year. And at least for my district, folks had additional 5 days to file papers if they wanted to. So I thought, there's been plenty of opportunity for those who are interested to come forward and run for office, and this money is probably not very well spent. But I actually had my mind changed during this meeting over the last 10, 15 minutes. Yeah, I think having an election is important. As someone who got the largest margin among the town council members in an election, it does make me take my job more seriously to know that my name was on a ballot. People saw it, people filled in those bubbles, and because they chose me, I'm accepting I think a greater degree of responsibility for this job, knowing that they had to make that choice. And I can't remember, maybe it was Councilmember Gold, maybe Shaw, even choosing not to vote is still a choice, right? So someone might see these three names and say, I don't like any of these people, or I like two and I don't like one. Giving people that opportunity to say no by not filling in any bubble is still giving them some kind of choice. And I think for Councilmember Gold, Councilmember Wall, and Hassan, it might, having an election will make them go out into the public and introduce themselves and get people to know who they are. And I do think it makes them more responsive to the public. I think we're more likely come November to have people say, why does this ballot not have any Woodside people on it? Then we will get people saying, oh, you spent $15,000. I can already imagine the emails come the first week of November saying, hey, I see the president, I see this, I see that. Where are our electeds, our local electeds? And if I respond and say, oh, that's already been done, don't worry about it, I could see people being very upset about that because, given the number of people who are in the room and online, I think most people just assume this is going to happen. And so I kind of want to meet those expectations. And yeah, I think it's important that we have our town council officials elected by the public, even if I wouldn't say it's not a foregone conclusion that these three will prevail, but even though it may on the surface not make a lot of financial sense, I think it's still very important for the public to be able to say yes or no to each of these people, even if the no is simply choosing not to vote for that individual. So I'm inclined to go forward with having an election in November, but I do see Councilmember Shaw's hand up.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Ned. You kind of spurred a question, and if it's all right, I'm going to ask Jean. I think I know the answer, but it leads to the larger conversation, which is if we chose to appoint, and at some point between now and the deadline for write-ins, somebody showed up and says, no, I want to write in. Is it, well, too bad, we've appointed and you're out of luck?
Yes.
And I'm assuming there's no liability for council or the town at that point, other than the court of public opinion.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Shaw. Any other comments, deliberation, questions from council?
I think this is Councilmember Domkowski, just like to acknowledge that when faced with the same situation, the good fiduciaries of Atherton, the City Council of Atherton voted unanimously to appoint, not waste taxpayer dollars in this way. And I want to acknowledge our colleagues there, in my mind, being wonderful watchdogs of their town's treasury.
Thank you for that. And I saw that article as well, and I appreciate that comment. And let me just again emphasize, I was definitely torn about this issue this year. Any other comments, questions, or deliberation from council? I see Councilmember Shaw rubbing his chin like.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just kind of
Go ahead, please, go
going
ahead.
on the whole thing. No, I mean, again, if having gone through the process, I think it kind of makes me the standard bearer, but I want to echo what Councilmember Domkowski said. It's a pretty sad state of affairs that, half of the current council or 60% of the incoming class next year, ran unopposed. I think, over the last couple of years, everybody that's on the call or in the room there, we've heard from the citizens about a lot of stuff, and most of the times it wasn't like you guys are the best, other than Paul. Paul, you're numero uno.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no, but the rest of us have taken it on the chin. Anyways, I thought there was a point. There's not. It must be my communicable disease.
Mr. Mayor,
You're as articulate as ever. Yes, go ahead, Kevin.
one other point that I just, to just echo what Councilmember Shaw just said. Everybody, I mean, I think actually Ned said this, and that is that it's inescapable that this is an election year. You've been living under a rock if you don't know that. Every citizen in Woodside who sat in this room with their pitchforks and torches had a chance to go visit Melissa and take out those election papers and fill out what seems to be a couple of 100 pages of documents and your financial disclosure and everything else. And they didn't do that. I did, Jen did, Hassan did. And, I think that I'm not going to apologize for running on. I've asked more than 20 people to please run for my seat. And they gave me, as I know many of my fellow council members know, I got a very fast no. No one even said, let me think about it, which would be the polite thing to do. What they said was no. They said no before I even finished the question. And so I'm willing to sit here and do it. I've got other things I'd rather do, to be perfectly frank. And as you well know, I don't enjoy sitting here being a dissenting vote on a lot of issues, but any more than I'm sure Brian does today. But I think that, we took the time and the effort to do it. We'll stand for the election, and that's just fine. I'm willing to do that. But I think that, yeah, it's a sad state of affairs when other people, they're so vocal about opposing us and think that we're not doing a great job, and they can't take the time to file for election. So maybe that'll change in the future. But for now, hey, that's the state of affairs. And, I'm running unopposed, but that's okay. I'll stand for election willingly and proudly. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for that. Any final comments from council? Okay, seeing none. So this is, a motion to affirmatively appoint. So I guess just to procedurally have to ask if there's a motion to appoint any of the three members. Okay.
Yeah, given the number of votes needed, it's very clear through deliberation that there would be no ability to pass this motion. So no from my end.
Okay. Gene, do we need, looking without a motion, is there anything else procedurally we need to do to kind of close out this issue?
No, if you do not adopt the resolutions, then we will automatically move to an election.
Okay. No magic words that I have to say.
I guess you could just indicate that there was no motion made on any of the three resolutions.
Okay, so seeing no motion made on the three resolutions, I believe that closes this agenda item and this meeting, unless our
Communication.
town manager has anything else he needs to inform us about.
I do not.
Public comments?
Do you want communications?
Communications are not agendized, I don't think.
I think they are.
They are?
Yeah.
Yeah, there is.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, they are. So any council member communications?
No.
No.
All right, none from me. Okay, no council member communications, nothing else from the staff. I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone, for doing this on a Thursday morning.
Yeah, I appreciate
Go ahead.
you getting together.
Might add Thursday morning on a holiday for the council day.
Yes, while we
Thank you,
were,
Mayor Fluid. Nice job.
thank you guys, and we will see you next month. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
When's our